What's going on, guys, and welcome back to Touchdowns to Home Runs. My name is Bernie. Thank you for joining us today on the Touchdowns to Home Runs show. Hope that your day is going absolutely fantastic. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the roster of the Michigan Wolverines. We'll be breaking down sort of what I've seen from each player over the course of this year, and then we'll progress into sort of where I think Michigan will end up making it to in the March Madness and looking out for some possible teams who could potentially beat them in the tournament. Should be a good one. Now, Michigan lost their second game of the season yesterday against Illinois. They lost to Minnesota in Minnesota earlier on this season, but they've been playing some really good basketball with some big ranked wins. Now, this is only one game, not a pretty one by any means, but no need to hit the panic button for Michigan Wolverines fans. We have enough ranked wins, I think, to be able to prove that we are one of the top teams in the country. And I think there could be some benefits that come away from that Illinois game. Even if we do end up falling down from a 1 to a 2 seed, even though I still think we will end up being a 1 seed come the March Madness, I think, it does a job to sort of humble our guys. We are not the greatest basketball team to ever touch a basketball court. So leading into the postseason tournament where we're going to have some big games, let's get our heads a little more leveled. Let's humble ourselves, refine our motivation, and I do think the Michigan Wolverines will bounce back. But let's take a look at sort of what's made the Michigan Wolverines so good this season. We'll start by breaking down their starting five: Mike Smith, Eli Brooks, Franz Wagner, Isaiah Livers, and obviously Hunter Dickinson at center. We'll start with the point guard and Mike Smith, and I think he's had a great year this year. You're talking about a guy who's got 8.6 points per game, 2.7 rebounds, and 5 assists. But Mike Smith really, had a lot of questions coming into the year on really two different accounts. First, right, Mike Smith was a transfer from Columbia, so he's coming from a non-Power 5 conference where he was a top scorer. But, I think a lot of people were wondering how that would transition into a bigger conference in the Big Ten, which is possibly the best basketball conference in all of Division I, right? And then also Michigan's point guard before, Xavier Simpson. Those are big shoes to fill. One of, if not the best point guards in all of college basketball over the course of the past few seasons. A guy who was not only a leader to Michigan, but had a real touch for being able to facilitate our offense, could score when we needed him to, play defense. Again, big shoes to fill for Mike Smith, but Mike Smith has done a great job of scoring when he has to. He's taken more of a back seat. He's not just necessarily chucking up shots. I think he does a fairly good job of distributing the basketball as well, and I think Michigan's entire offense is really good at facilitating as an entire unit. Moving on to the shooting guard position, Eli Brooks, being inconsistent at times, 8.8 points per game, about 3 rebounds and 3 assists each. Eli Brooks is a really good three-point shooter, I think. But again, he's inconsistent, but when Eli Brooks scores, he can score in chunks. Obviously a great three-point shooter, but I would love to see Eli Brooks be able to drive a bit more. We've seen him do it a bunch over the course of this season. He can do it. He just chooses to sit on the perimeter more often than not, which I'm not necessarily opposed to, but I do think he could develop into more of a driving type player and, finish out his overall game. Franz Wagner, over the course of his whole career over these past 2 seasons for the Wolverines, I've spoken so highly about Franz Wagner, who this season about 13 points per game, 6.5 boards, and just under 3 assists. He's a guy who can shoot the 3 ball, and I think if you look of anybody in the Michigan Wolverines roster for potential NBA talent, Franz Wagner is that guy. He's got the length. He's a great defender. He's a great wing player, can shoot the 3 ball, get to the free throw line. He really does it all, and there's been some fantastic plays that I've seen over the course of the entire season, but particularly the last few games with his Euro step. And obviously back in Europe, he played some good games. He comes from a basketball family. And he's still younger than Hunter Dickinson, I'm pretty sure, who is our freshman. So Franz Wagner still has the age factor to him, and the more he plays, the more experience he gets. I think the better that Franz Wagner gets in terms of his overall skill. Isaiah Livers, 14.2 points per game, 6.2 rebounds, and 2.1 assists. Isaiah Livers fills up the stat sheet. He's the backbone of this Michigan Wolverines team. He's a guy who can shoot the 3 ball, has pretty good percentages overall. Looked like he might have gotten a little hurt yesterday. Thank goodness he was playing by the end of the game. Even though it was a loss, it's a good sign that, we didn't see Isaiah Livers hurt, because if we remember sort of what happened when he was hurt last year, Michigan started up here and went all the way down. We need Isaiah Livers. Even if he's not our leading scorer, he's a guy who makes hustle plays defensively, obviously a great scorer, and probably, if not the number one leader on this Michigan team. Other than Juwan Howard, I mean, in terms of players, right, Isaiah Livers is the leader. Definitely need him in the lineup, and he does so much for this Michigan Wolverines team. And then finally, we got Hunter Dickinson. 14.4 points per game, leads the way for the Michigan Wolverines, 7.7 rebounds. He's done a great job. Really, this entire Michigan Wolverines team has done a great job rebounding the basketball besides last night, and about 1.5 blocks. Shoots pretty well in terms of under the rim. He's really aggressive. He's always moving, trying to get open, trying to get those correct angles. And he's really matured in terms of his footwork. You know, sometimes we forget he's only a freshman, but he's a guy who's dominated, you know, some of the best to do it in the Big Ten. Nate Reavers, Luka Garza, and so on. Yesterday might have been a different story against Kofi Cockburn, but, you know, overall, Hunter Dickinson has shown me so much promise this year. Next up, now we are moving on to sort of where Michigan, I could see them ending up sort of getting to in the March Madness tournament. And in order to do that, the way that we're going to break it down is sort of in the AP top 10, how many teams can I really see beating the Michigan Wolverines? Number one in the AP polls is the Gonzaga Bulldogs, and to say that the Gonzaga Bulldogs wouldn't have a chance against the Michigan Wolverines would be absolutely absurd. When you look at the Gonzaga Bulldogs, you got 4 double-digit scorers in Kispert, Timmy, Suggs, and Ayayi, but you look all over this roster, they're a great rebounding team, facilitate the basketball, shoot the 3-ball really well. Really similar to Michigan's play style, and so is Baylor, actually. But Gonzaga, obviously, with the number one adjusted offense in terms of the Ken Pom rankings, and for good reason. I mean, Gonzaga is going to be a threat, and if they're a team who, you know, Michigan ends up playing in the Final Four or championship game, that's definitely one to watch, and I would be worried as a Michigan Wolverines fan. Number 3 in the AP polls is the Baylor Bears. Just won the Big 12 yesterday, so congratulations to you guys. First time in like 70 plus years. You guys got a great team. And what was really interesting, I thought, yesterday in that big West Virginia win was that Jared Butler actually fouled out with a couple minutes left in overtime, Baylor's best player. And they found a way in a very gritty game without their top scorer to get the job done. And he had like 25 points, so he played a massive part in that. But you look at the rest of the roster, Mitchell, Maceo Teague. This team, you know, again, distributes the basketball, shoots a 3-ball really well, but they're not just doing it with one player. They have, again, I think 3 or 4 double-digit scores. Baylor is a team who should be making it to the Final Four and would, again, pose Michigan a big threat. Number 4 in the AP polls is Illinois. Obviously, Michigan played them yesterday, and that was without Dosunmu. So to say that Illinois wouldn't have a chance against Michigan, again, would be absolutely absurd. If it does come to the March Madness, though, I do think Michigan would be more level-headed, and I would still pick Michigan to be that favorite in that game. But you look at Illinois with Dosunmu, with Kofi Cockburn, the roster keeps going down and down, but they got 2 superstars on that roster, opposed to a team like Iowa, where I would say they only have 1. Illinois is such a good rebounding team. They beat Michigan in their own game yesterday. Illinois is definitely a team to look out for. Number 5 is Iowa. Michigan dominated Iowa in the second half of their game that they played last week or whenever it was. I wouldn't see Iowa beating Michigan in the tournament, and people can hate on me for saying that in the comment section down below. But what I don't like about Iowa is, yes, they're a deep team. They don't necessarily get all their production from Luka Garza, but when you shut down Luka Garza, you're essentially, you know, really taking away a whole bunch of production from this team. Hunter Dickinson played absolutely phenomenal matching up against Luka Garza in their first matchup of the year. And it was probably the best individual performance that I've seen against him throughout this entire season so far. I would not say that Iowa beats Michigan. West Virginia, I wouldn't say beats Michigan either, but I will give them credit for a very gritty game yesterday against Baylor. Baylor still coming off that long delay, had a really bad game against Iowa State, against Kansas. I was expecting them to fully bounce back to full strength against West Virginia. Obviously not the case, and they did a great job yesterday. I thought West Virginia, until the end of regulation and overtime when they got a little sloppy. But other than that, they got a ton of talent on this roster with Culver, McBride. I don't think West Virginia would beat Michigan, but definitely a team to watch out for in March Madness. Ohio State, again, Michigan has already beat in a very good game with E.J. Liddell leading the way at their guard position. Ohio State's a very talented team, and I've said this before. I'm a Michigan Wolverines fan, and I absolutely hate giving Ohio State any credit at all. But I have to give it where it's due, and Ohio State is a talented team. The Ohio State-Michigan game was, in my opinion, the game of the year out of all the games that I've watched so far. Two high-scoring, high-powered offenses. I don't know if that would necessarily be the same case in the second game, but Ohio State does have the potential to beat Michigan in the March Madness. Number 8, Alabama Crimson Tide have had an absolutely fantastic season in the SEC. With Shackelford over there, Jones as one of their forwards who's leading 4 of their 5 team stats. Alabama's had some big wins. They're ranked number 8 in the AP polls for a reason. 4 double-digit scores, so really similar, layout to how Gonzaga, Baylor, Michigan is. They're not as good defensively, in my opinion, although some of you could probably argue that in the comment section below. But I don't think Alabama would be beating Michigan. Rounding it out, we have Houston and Villanova. Houston is led by Grimes, another guard as well. Michigan's guard play is so fantastic. Honestly, I don't think they get beat by guards. I think they're really good defensively, but what's really interesting about Houston is their top 3 scorers are all listed on as guards according to ESPN. So really weird sort of matchup for Michigan, but again, I don't see them beating Michigan. And then Villanova, obviously a talented team led by a very talented coach in Jay Wright. They've had some bad losses this year, including their most recent one to Butler. But again, this is a great team on both sides of the basketball, and when you got a coach like Jay Wright, with the talent that he has, their threat in the March Madness, I think Villanova would have the potential to beat Michigan. Looking outside the top 10, I'm not going to break down any more teams, but obviously there are teams who could upset Michigan. Any one of these 10 teams, any team who makes the March Madness has the potential to upset Michigan. Those are the teams that I think could possibly upset them in the March Madness this year in the top 10. But again, in the comment section below, don't rip on me because there are a ton of teams out there who obviously have the potential to beat the Wolverines. So as for my prediction of where Michigan gets to in the March Madness, given that about, 5 teams, I think, in the top 10 have a legitimate shot at beating the Wolverines, I think they have to reach the Final Four. I don't know if they're going to be a 1 or a 2 seed, but I would expect them still again to make the Final Four. I think that Michigan will end up somewhere between the Elite 8 and winning the championship. I definitely think they have the potential to do so. I think Final Four, maybe a finalist against like a Gonzaga in the national championship would be my prediction as of now. But obviously I'm hoping that they end up getting it done and cutting down the nets at the beginning of April. But if you guys did make it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts and your comments on the Michigan Wolverines and what you guys are expecting come the Big Ten Conference Tournament and eventually the March Madness Tournament as well. I want to hear it all down in the comment section below. If you guys did enjoy today's video, again, make sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe to Touchdowns to Home Runs. We've been putting out a ton of March Madness coverage. If you want to see my latest bracketology, just go on to Touchdowns to Home Runs. Make sure to check that out. Some great videos. But again, make sure to subscribe. Stick around for coverage throughout the entire conference tournaments and March Madness. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching and hope to see you again next time.